Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the last session of our webinars this Professional Co-workers Week. Professional Co-workers Week 2024 is the 6th year of celebrations of co-workers, their amazing skills, compassion, and everything that they give to the sector and to the wider society. This afternoon, we're focusing on home care, and I have with me some lovely home care business related people here. So I'll start with Trudy Fell from Bellevue, then Dan Archer from Visiting Angels, Martin Jones from Home Instead, and also the chair of the Co-workers charity, Kevin Ashley from Miyako, and Amrit Dual from Wolfinch. There you go. That's what happens when you don't put the name of your company in the name. I get confused. Anyway, lovely, everybody. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I really appreciate it. I know how busy you are, so you sharing your opinions and knowledge will be very helpful. So we'll dive straight in with the first question, and that will be around what are you currently doing to support care workers working in home care? Because obviously Professional Co-workers Week is all about the workforce, so it'll be important to start with that. And Martin, could you start us off, please?
Thanks, Carolina. Good afternoon, everyone. So at Home Instead, we've got quite a few initiatives to support the care workers in their own home, or we call them care professionals. And the first thing is contact. That's contact in terms of with our workforce is really important. It is a remote workforce doing an incredibly valuable job. So we have contact in terms of face-to-face. We have a lot of supervisions, a lot of follow-up consultations and meetings and training groups. And we call them the Hour of Love. So we ensure that's really, really important. We have contact through technology. So I've got an app which really feeds back to us how a care worker's feeling. Not necessarily whether just about the call itself, but how they're feeling emotionally as well. So we offer a lot of well-being around our care workforce. I'm not going to talk about training, etc., because I'm taking that as a given that should be provided. And we also have an employee assistance program, which wraps around all of our 17,000 employees out there delivering the care they do. And that's everything from financial support, emotional support, anything really in there, not connected to the job particularly, but the emotional well-being. So we do a lot to support. We can always do more. We do a lot, but I think the most important thing is that certainly, our care workers have got needs, not just financial, but a lot of them are just, having the respect that they deserve and the recognition. We spend a lot of time on their recognition to support our workforce, because I think it's absolutely crucial. Because we don't get, if our care workers aren't supported, our clients aren't supported. So it's having that great interface with our care workers that's really linked into the client as well. We do a lot. Could always do more, but we do quite a lot in terms of the one-to-one technology, etc.
Thank you very much, Martin. And Trudy.
That's good to hear, because it's all about valuing care workers, isn't it? I mean, I worked as a care worker years ago, and I know how great the work is and what all of our professional care workers do day in, day out. But society doesn't always perceive and value our care workers as they should. So at Bellevue, we do lots of things that I see other organisations doing and want to do more of. We'll fund a blue light card. You have a day off on your birthday. We have regular wellness activities and opportunities for care workers to get together, weekly team meetings. But actually, our biggest difference is really in our ways of working, because ultimately, I don't think, and from talking to our care workers, they don't want the frivolous little extras, because fundamentally they want things that make this a good job, that's a valued job and a career within a sector that they love. And Bellevue is a bit different in that our operating model was inspired by a model which has revolutionised community nursing over in the Netherlands called Buurtzorg. It's a great thing to look up if you've not heard of it before. It's fabulous. And it's all about really flattening the structure within an organisation and empowering and trusting care workers. And who doesn't want to be empowered and trusted at work? And so our organisation has small teams who manage themselves. So there's a lot more autonomy in our setup. So teams of, say, around 8 care workers in a team, and they make the day-to-day decisions on how to deliver the best care. We don't have any managers in our organisation. We have coaches instead of managers. We still have leadership. It's important that we have people who set the what, but then our care workers work out the how. That can sound really good, but it also requires a lot of personal responsibility, and it's not the right setup for everybody. Because, for instance, we don't have any like rota coordinator, rota manager type roles. The team, the care workers, manage their rota between them. If someone calls in off sick, the team work that out. And we've built our own tech platform to help, because the off-the-shelf systems didn't work. So that you can see what neighbouring teams are doing and ask for help there. But basically our whole model, everything we do, we've designed and co-designed with our care workers to create an environment where they feel valued, supported and thrive. Because similar to Martin's closing sentiment is, a care worker can only support somebody else to feel valued and live their best life if they're feeling valued and supported and are able to live their best life at work. And that's what it's all about.
Thank you very much, Trudy. And Dan?
Thanks, Carolina. And I think I'd probably pick up on where Trudy left off really there. As the owner of a care business, as the lead on a network of care business owners from across the UK, I don't provide care. I employ a team of people and they provide care. And we talk of that in the business as being carer-centric. A phrase that I think I was the first to use. And what we mean by being carer-centric is that lots of ways of describing it. My team are critical of me for talking about loving caregivers. I don't know why they're critical of me for talking about it that way, because caregivers deserve all the love they can get, in actual fact. But loving caregivers is one way to see it. As a business, we look at decisions that we take slightly differently. So as an organisation, the question we're constantly asking is, if we do that, is it in the best interest of a caregiver? Because if it's not carer-centric, and as a result of that, we don't do it, irrespective of how commercially attractive it might be to do it. We don't do it if it's not carer-centric. And probably the best way to describe being carer-centric, I would say, is seeing the world through the eyes of a caregiver. And that's what we try to do. And so we ask ourselves lots of questions. And we ask, the questions we ask with regard to pay, as an example. The pay rate needed to be higher. So we are trying to engineer a way that we can pay caregivers £2 to £3 an hour more than minimum wage where we can. Care workers need to be paid for their travel time. So we absolutely are paying for travel time. We're guaranteeing pay increases. We're providing life insurance. I would echo exactly what's been said so far. This is not about frivolous things. I would say the things that need to be done to support a care worker well can probably be best described as 3 things, 3 groups of things, if you will. The table stakes items, the things which are essential in order to have a conversation about anything that follows. And that is pay, contracts, and benefits. Okay. Then it's about engagement. Exactly as Martin said, we're working with a remote workforce. Unless we try to engineer a team when you're working with a remote workforce, you don't get one by accident. So you have to create opportunities to allow people to feel like they are engaged and belong. We do 4 events a year. We have a Christmas party, an Easter egg hunt. We have a fireworks party because I like setting off fireworks. And we also have a summer barbecue. And for the last 4 years in Sheffield, my summer barbecue has been a music festival called Carefest, where we try to bring everybody in care within the community together. So that's about engagement. And I think, the final piece of the jigsaw is, as Martin again has already said, is about recognition. And that recognition is as simple in some instances as making sure care workers are listened to. Absolutely, it's about ensuring that they are celebrated and engaged with. We have an app. We have a program called Angel Care, which is a wellbeing program for the visiting angels. Our caregivers are called angels because we are visiting angels. So the app we have monitors wellbeing, but actually also enables communication. It enables the collective belonging, but it also enables, when we have caregiver of the week, month, year, all of the caregivers within the network to celebrate those that are recognized in that way. And again, that's a really important way of allowing people to feel like they belong to a collective. So those are just some of the things that we think are important to visiting angels.
Thank you very much, Dan. And Amrit?
Hi guys, nice to be here and with everybody. I think it's so exciting to have care providers that are thinking about care workers and putting them at the heart of the journey. And I really, Dan, I really enjoyed the sort of 3 points. I think you summed it up very nicely. You know, at Wolffinch, we deal with all the hygiene factors. You know, I think fair pay and career opportunities really are part of that in the training, as Martin said earlier. And putting that at having care workers that are in the poverty line is unacceptable, and really recognizing that and talking about it, because it is the case. And I think having that open conversation with care workers, and you know, from our perspective, from franchisees, and making sure that they're aware of that is a really important factor. One of the things that we're probably quite proud of at Wolffinch is the Wolffinch Wellbeing Program that we've initiated this year, and that really encompasses all the different things that we do with care workers and for care workers. And so, yes, the fair pay and the career opportunities are there. So we've had quite recently somebody that started off providing care and has moved their way up from management into ownership of a business, which we've really worked with them along that journey and helped fund the start of that, which has been very exciting. You've got then all the very sort of more simple items around the well-being on a day-to-day level, and that mental health well-being, and having that connectivity. So how are we conducting meetings? What's the location of that? Is that in office? Is that in a coffee shop where we can really sort of get to know somebody and really understand people and what drives them and lives? What's the dog's name? What's the chicken's name? And all of that kind of stuff, and really kind of get under the hood with care workers, but teaching that. So for me, one of the problems that we've got in the sector is around leadership. And so if we don't have that taught into business owners, that's never going to get down to your supervisor level, care worker level, and so on. So really focusing on that whole aspect, and also looking at how we recognize care workers. What are we doing for them? So is it we're getting out and building team spirit through doing drinks with them on a quarterly basis, and then there's the team meetings. There's right, how are we talking about this new safeguarding change? Well, let's have a pizza and beer evening in the office, and just making it a very relaxed atmosphere, but keeping the conversation open. Because I think what we forget, and having been in the sector now for just over 10 years, when I first came in, what I really realized was that it feels like care workers are names on a spreadsheet, and one goes, 3 more will come, don't worry about it, just keep churning out and take the hours on. But I think it really needs to be a migration towards thinking about what's going on in that care worker's life. How do we support them throughout everything else as well? You're going through difficult times, you're going through a divorce and so on, and all those things impact what you're doing at work. So I think really understanding people is one of the things that we're very proud of, and teaching that leadership piece around franchisees to deal with care workers.
Thank you very much, Amrit. Kevin, and from your point of view?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks, Carolina. And I must admit, I agree with everything that's been said today. And truly, I love your operating model, by the way. I think it's fantastic. As a learning provider, I think our focus is very much driven by our clients, but also care workers. So really, the challenge I give my team on a daily basis is, how do we give care professionals the ability to learn new skills and refresh their existing skills easier? And how do we do that in a way that it's not taking too much time for them to do that? Because providing with courses that last an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours is, we know they're time pressures. So we're looking at more at bite-sized learning. We're looking at more micro bite-sized learning, so that people can learn at that time of need, not just to be compliant. We're also trying to make learning more accessible. For example, we're integrating with Nourish Rostering, so that you can actually access your MyEcho training through the Nourish Rostering app, not have to come into multiple apps with multiple passwords, which you forget, to access your learning. We're also looking at more at not just compliance training, but we've been asked to deliver more interpersonal skills and communication skills, how to deal with emotional resilience, your mental health, and your well-being has been mentioned by a number of people here. you know, it's important that managers have those skills, but also we give care workers the ability to be able to manage their own well-being, as well as the well-being of the people they're supporting. But probably some of the key things we're going to do is we're going to flip the assessment process, your knowledge assessment process, on its head. At the moment, you will complete your training and then take a knowledge assessment. We're actually going to assess your knowledge first. And you're only going to take the training that you either didn't know or what you forgot. So our trials has shown that, for example, if you have an 80% pass mark and someone gets 70% and then does the 30% of the training they fail, then the knowledge, their pass mark the second time is more like 90 to 95%, because they retained the knowledge bit that they didn't know, rather than trying to do training around everything they do know. Now, the benefit for the learner is you're only focused on new learning or things you forgot. And the benefit for the organization is obviously there's a productivity saving that the care worker can use to support their clients. And therefore, you're not spending time training on things you already know, which to me is a waste of time. The other aspect that we've looked at and we've listened to from carers is we're going to spread the training over a 12-month period rather than the concentrated period, which quite often happens at the moment. So you can get your trained with some clients, they're training over a 1 to 2 month period every year. Whereas if we spread it over a 12-month period, you've got a better chance to learn the knowledge, but it's also giving time back to the carers once again, because you haven't got that concentrated period of learning. And by doing the pre-assessment and a 12-month learning plan, which includes your own personal development and your interpersonal skills, we think it'll actually make it better, not just for the carer, but also for the clients they support as well.
Lovely, thank you very much. And I've seen a lot of things online, and not just around social care, about micro learning and bite-sized learning, and that's much easier for people to access that when they want to, when they can, and that they can access it on their phone rather than on a desktop. So the kind of availability and ease of access is incredibly important. Martin, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, actually, but at one point I did forget to mention what we've done. We introduced a Care Pro Council 2 years ago now, which I think someone's mentioned about listening. I think that's probably one of the most important things we fail to do, not just with our care professionals, but with everybody really, particularly into our teams. And they meet quarterly and for half a day or full day, and they impact our strategy in our business. So they have a direct line. We'll listen to our franchise owners, we'll listen to our care managers. So why not listen to our care professionals? And actually, out of that has kind of driven a care professional blog that we started to do as well, because some of the stories you hear are heartwarming, but also some are challenging as well. And some are absolutely hilarious. So it's really worth sharing. So yeah, I think I forgot to mention that when I was waffling on before. So I just thought I'd share that as well. Listening is really so important.
Thank you, Martin. And that leads me nicely to mention our new Care Worker Advisory Board and Care Champions project that we just launched this week with funding from the RAIN Foundation, where we'll be doing exactly that. We want to be led by care workers, and we want care workers to lead the sector in decision-making and policy, strategy, etc. So we want to make sure that care workers in every room, that decisions, especially big decisions about social care and the workforce, are being made. So listening to care workers is definitely our priority. Right, let's move on to the next question, and that is about the social care regulator. So obviously in the last few months, especially, I'm not saying only, there have been big issues, and I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts about the CQC. So Trudy, could you start us off, please?
Yeah, sure. And it's going to be an interesting discussion. So, there might be care workers on here who say, well, actually, what is going on with the CQC? And there's no getting away from it. The CQC is supposed to be there to add value to the public, and it's not. It's right now, it is causing pain. As just one specific example, we were expanding into a new location, so we needed to add that location to our area. It took 9 months to get the paperwork that we'd submitted correctly. There were no problems with that, but it took 9 months. Most of that 9 months, it was waiting in a queue to meet somebody who knew enough about the checks and balances that we needed to get through to then say we could open in a new area. Now, we have people who need care. We have organizations like ours who wanted to expand in that area. And then the end result is that people are then kind of like having to work around. So we had a neighboring area. It's like, well, how far? It's complex. So we really need the powers that be to listen, to make sure that the sector is being supported by our regulator. And if we're not being supported by our regulator, then our care professionals are not being represented, and the people we support are not getting the service they require. The other thing that I found really frustrating in the last 18 months is we've had a lot of changes to visa rules around international recruitment, and I'm really welcoming people with great skills from other countries to come here and provide care. However, and we've seen it in the panorama programs, etc., there was huge abuse of the visa system. The Home Office have stated, I think it was initially a whistleblower, but now they've agreed that the numbers that they expected, the numbers of applicants they expected, turned out to be much larger than it exceeded all their expectations, and they didn't have the manpower to look after it. The CQC also didn't. So we had it lowered the quality of care, and that's not down to the individuals who came in from other countries. That's down to the organizations some organizations following that route were not doing things in an ethical way. And the rest of us, ethical care providers, needed our regulator there to say what's happening and what do we do about it, so that we have the right level of recruitment from other countries. So I admit to feeling let down, but I'm also conscious that being a regulator is a really tough job, and we only get improvement if we work with people rather than bash them. So a collaborative approach. But to get to that point, I mean, what is a good regulator? It's one that's able to deliver outcomes that maximize public value. So I want to hold them accountable to that. I want all of us to do that. And we need a route to get us there.
Thank you very much, Trudy. And you mentioned the international recruitment on a call earlier today. I did mention that the Co-workers Charity, we're pushing for the abandonment of the rule of no dependence for care workers being the only profession with that rule being put upon them.
Yeah.
And whether the numbers were expected or not, this is not the way to regulate the numbers, because obviously the number of people putting applications in has dropped drastically since the rule was introduced.
Yeah.
It's just a very unethical way to approach anybody, especially people that we're asking to come over to this country and support lives and well-being of our loved ones, but also you don't have a right to your own family and relationship. So I did put that across to the minister yesterday in a meeting as well, as something that the government could agree quite quickly already and reverse as a rule. And I do agree, because we've had a lot of information about that coming across our inboxes at the Co-workers Charity. Poor treatment of care workers who come over by some providers, some people using an excuse of a care visa to set up a fake care business, etc. So it does have to be much better administered and regulated. But I don't think the answer to that is saying, oh no, care workers can't come over with the dependents and dropping the numbers that way.
Correctly. We need well-managed recruitment from overseas, because then that truly will be a solution, a part of the solution to the recruitment and retention challenge that we face here. And we need our regulator to play a role in that, the CQC as well as the Home Office, to work together, because the example you just gave, it's not a person-centered approach, and it's not going to work. We need care workers who are arriving here to make a career and provide consistency of care, and clearly arriving with their dependents is going to help make that happen. So yeah, thank you for representing us, Carolina.
Right, Dan, your thoughts on CQC?
How long have we got? This is not a 3-hour session. And so to sum up, what I would echo what Trudy says. We are an expanding franchise network, as I know, Amrit, you are an expanding franchise network. And we added 21 franchisees in the last 12 months. An uncomfortable number of those are not yet registered, which is ridiculous. When I registered my pilot business for Sheffield, it took 9 weeks top to bottom to get registered. When CQC tried to improve their own process by recognizing it made no sense to put a domiciliary care provider in the same work of basket as a secure mental institution, and they created the model office structure. Our North Surrey franchisee was the first office in the country to go through the model office structure, 7 weeks, top to bottom. For it to take 7 to 8 months is challenging for the people that need care. It's challenging for those investing in running care businesses who now need a colossal increase in working capital in order to keep the thing afloat whilst they're waiting for registration. And it's not good for society either. I guess if I was going to give a scorecard to CQC, I would want to evaluate CQC on the old key lines of inquiry, I suppose. Are they safe, caring, responsive, effective, and well led? And the answer, unfortunately, to most of those questions is they are probably not. But I've got huge sympathy for the organisation. I think they've been given an impossible task. Their workload has been increased dramatically. To move the CQC from just taking care of the regulation of social care to also have them take care of the commissioning of care with local authorities and give them no additional resource to do that. To have CQC also having to deal with the health tent that might appear at a music festival has to be signed off by, it's ridiculous. Yeah, you can't carry on increasing somebody's workload, not give them more resource to deal with the extra work they've got, and expect anything other than the situation we find ourselves in. So I've got real sympathy for that. I do think that most of the challenges that CQC face, ironically, given one of the biggest challenges in the sector is staff turnover, are based in their own staff turnover. I think they've lost an awful lot of very capable individuals from within their workforce. And I think the delay in registration is absolutely because they've got a bottleneck. It's fairly straightforward to evaluate a submission for new registration at the front end, but it takes a bit of time to do a fit person interview. And because it takes a bit of time, as an inspector, you can probably only do 2 or 3 of those a day. So there's an awful lot of people waiting for an appointment with someone to do a fit person interview. So I would volunteer a solution. I'm not sure whether anybody within CQC would care to hear the solution that I would volunteer, but as a commercial organisation, I would be very happy to pay £5,000 to fast track a CQC application. I do that all day long. Yeah, it would save my franchisees considerably more than that in working capital, in actual fact. And CQC could take a proportion of that £5,000 and they could pay it to an ex-CQC inspector that is now a consultant working in the sector for them to do the job that they would have done when they were employed by the CQC. The self-employed inspector works well and they benefit from that. The industry benefits from that. We benefit from that. CQC's workload is eased. So yeah, we have to remember that's the model in Scotland, right? In Scotland, you pay up front in order to get your registration through. It's just in the UK that we do all of the work and then charge kind of on subscription after the fact, right? So I think there are things that could be done differently that would help. But I have to come at it from a perspective of having huge sympathy for what they're trying to, the government, the previous government anyway, has asked them to do an awful lot of additional work and given no extra resource to be able to do that.
Thank you very much, Dan. Interesting, because I hear a lot about mock inspections by former CQC inspectors. So that's an interesting idea.
Sorry, Caroline, just to say on that, we've taken a decision as a business that we will pay to get those people to do those mock inspections because I've not talked about inspections. They are not inspecting in the frequency that they ought to be either.
Thank you, Dan. Martin?
Yeah, I think there's a few things, and just to echo the Home Care Associations, as I would do, report that we put out some time ago. This actually stems back to pre-COVID, but particularly COVID as well, where certainly home care agencies were just ignored during that period and not inspected. That we've got a quarter of home care registered locations, 23%, I think the figure is, have never been inspected. 40% of home care agencies haven't been inspected for 4 to 8 years. The whole purpose of CQC is around trust. It's about building trust in the sector. It's about building trust when someone wants to go to a home care provider, care home, whoever, to provide care for the loved one. And CQC gives that umbrella support that actually this organisation, this facility, this business, whatever, actually does a good level of care to look after your mum, your dad, your son, whoever it may be. That is ultimately their role. And over years, the trust, not only the sector has lost with CQC, but it's more importantly, the public is losing with CQC as well. You know, the role is to enable people to have a view on where do I put mum or dad, who's going to, you know, provide that care, and they're just failing to do that. So, what Trudy and Dan have made some really good suggestions, but there's two things that really stick out for me with CQC. One's about leadership, which Dan's touched on. If you have a look at the employee survey that they did on their own people, I've never seen an employee survey like that in my life in any organisation, in any sector. That's not down to funding. That's just down to pure leadership. Then if you look at the capital expenditure, so that not in terms of the data, the CapEx, they've raised over year after year after year for technology enhancements, etc., which has been misappropriated and not well thought, whatever the rationale. But that's where a lot of the funding's gone as well. But the big one is, you know, we all have challenges running organizations. We all have communication issues, budgeting issues, what have you, sector issues. And you have got good leaders kind of find a way through. I think Trudy made a good point. This is not a time to throw stones at them as well. New government, it's a time for opportunity, but there has to become a time whereby something has to change, and maybe the whole of the CQC kind of needs root and branch change. From a leadership perspective, from an organisation perspective, culturally, there's something obviously very, very wrong in that organisation. And then as a sector, we just need to lean in and support them and get some solutions to help them. Because I come back, the reason they're there is around trust. Because what we do is so important, it's just too important to fail. So if they're not doing that really key role, it will impact us all. In terms of how the sector starts to be perceived. So we need to be with them at the trenches, but they need to turn up to the trenches first, and they need to acknowledge that a lot of what they've done, a lot of the changes they've made have been wrong, and then we can move forward as a sector with CQC and put some change in spirit. And I would also say they've registered 36% more home care businesses year on year. And that's been driven by the councils and the local authorities because they wanted lower rate care. That can't continue. That is just mad, absolutely mad, because it goes back to Dan and Trudy's point. You can't continue to do the same thing with the same resource and put 36% more on top of it, then do a new framework and then try to introduce new technology. But it comes back to one thing, and that's leadership for me. It really comes back to that and leadership. And that's where things have started to change a bit, but have to change significantly, which I think the new government is going to try and grip.
Thank you very much, Martin. Kevin, you are not a care provider, but do you have a view on the CQC?
Yeah, I have a strong view on this, and I agree with everything that everybody said today. You know, my worry is nothing changes, and we're still having the same discussion in a year's time. Yet, in fact, what's changed is things get worse as part of this. I agree with Martin. I think CQC needs a complete restructuring. If it was a commercial business, you wouldn't accept the outcomes you're getting now because you wouldn't have a business. You wouldn't be able to survive in this marketplace. I certainly agree with what Dan and Trudy are saying as well, but I think they need to focus on more person-centered care and outcome-based assessments. I'd like to see a more streamlined inspection process, which focuses on the quality indicators for the service user and also for the care providers. But I'd also like to see a greater emphasis on providing support and guidance rather than, you know, a big stick type approach. But I can't see where they're going to get the time and the or the right skill set or the ability to be able to take a more proactive approach. But I feel that's what's needed across the industry. You know, we should be sharing best practice. We should be recognizing the care providers who are outstanding and are doing an excellent job, and also the care providers who want to be outstanding but don't know how to get there or need a guidance on how to get there. And to me, all of that seems to be missing. And I think if we flipped it on CQC on its head, where it is about trust, I totally agree with that, but it's more about building an industry that we can all be proud of, rather than inspecting afterwards because there's been a failure and people die. I think we're too reactive. We need to be more proactive as a CQC. That's my humble view.
Thank you, Kevin. Very useful. And Amrit.
Thank you. I sort of echo all of my colleagues here, all of their frustrations. And I think Martin's thought on quite a positive approach to it, I think is really useful. Specifically, I think if we are playing the blame game, we're always going to be in a problem. What we need is a collaborative approach. We have tremendous issues around registrations, and as with Dan, we've got new businesses, and those new businesses, some of them are they going to make it? Are they even going to be able to trade? Because the 100 or so £1,000 that they started off with, half of that or more disappears waiting to get registered. So we've got some real issues in terms of finances that is going to impact all of the capacity within the sector. I think also that the trust, as I think Martin was saying, or Trudy, but I think the trust element is a huge issue. So 5 or 6 years ago, if my mother was going to get care from a care provider, I would have looked at CQC, read the report and thought, okay, where are we at? Whereas now we're really moving much more into a retail model of saying, what are the reviews saying? What's Google saying? What is homecare.co.uk saying? And so on. I have no interest in a 5-year-old or 4-year-old CQC report. So I think if CQC, in my opinion, are at a crossroads, and if they don't sort of hold on to this, then the impact that they have in the sector will start to diminish over time. And finally, I think that we've got a real opportunity here to work collaboratively, and for CQC to work with small providers and understand what's happening ground level and really try to fix that. How do we streamline this? Do we do interim inspections? Majority of the industry is now digital. How do we leverage that so that you can get one person that would have normally had to go out and go and inspect in person could do something remotely, and maybe doing something similar in terms of registrations and so on. I think there's a lot of kind of workable solutions there, and I think leveraging technology but without sort of spending a tremendous amount of capital on that is really important. But we have huge concerns, and a lot of those concerns are around us not being able to stay true to our word when you are recruiting a franchisee or speaking to care workers or going on their sort of career journeys, because we've got no indication of how long something may take.
Thank you very much, Amrit. Very interesting. Now, putting CQC aside, obviously we have a new government in place that was elected just a couple of months ago. They've been working for the past few weeks with the summer recess in place. It wasn't what isn't 2 full months, but what would you like to see? What kind of changes, reform agenda from the new government? And Kevin, can I ask you to start, please?
Yes, by all means, thanks. I think personally, I'd like to see the current funding model change dramatically. I think there needs to be an increase of funding and investment in home care. I think there needs to be a workforce strategy to invest, to address the low pay within the sector. I think the model needs to change for it to be more of a profession for a carer. And I think the government needs to lead that. I think there needs to be a greater emphasis on support of preventative care, i.e. that we're dealing with people, we're helping people to educate people before they become ill, and also helping and supporting them better after they come out of hospital and they get the right care they need. I think care in the home has to change from a transactional basis where it's focused on time, but it's more about the care we provide and the care that individual needs at that time, which is quite different in the sense of being able to give the carer the time to be able to provide the care that they know the individual needs, not have a schedule to be able to race off to the next place they've got to actually provide care, and therefore not provide the quality of care the carer would really like to provide. And Trudy, I know you do a lot in your organization about that, to give the carer time if they need it. I think there needs to be more support on digital innovation. I think with the advances in AI, we can use that to identify better support and better care that can be provided. And Amrit mentioned technology earlier on with CQC, but I believe that with the advances we're making, there should be more information at the fingertips of the carer to be able to allow them to make more decisions and more educated decisions to support the people they're also caring. So for me, it's four things: increasing funding, investment in home care, a greater emphasis on preventative care, recognizing care workers as a profession, and more support for digital innovation and training wrapped around all of that, not just for carers, but also for the families of people we're supporting as well, because I think there's a knowledge gap there as well. Those would be my four key things.
Lovely, thank you. And you mentioned AI, and at the charity, we've been involved with Digital Social Care and the Oxford University in a project around creating guidance for the sector around the use of AI, and at this point, particularly generative AI like ChatGPT, because people are using it, but there is no guidance of how to do it safely, especially around personal data. We held a roundtable with care workers at the end of May, and they were expressing concerns about using personal devices around the liability if mistakes happen, around data protection, etc. So this week, on Monday, we launched a guidance that care workers help co-write with the Oxford University and Digital Social Care. More guidance is being put together from the care provider's point of view and from people who run social care point of view. Because as we know with technology, governments are always very late in creating any type of guidance, and this technology is moving very fast. So I don't think we can avoid people using it, and we should encourage people to using it. It's just how to do it safely and in the right way for the context. So yes, thank you for mentioning AI. Martin, your hopes and asks of the new government.
Yeah, some similar themes, but not quite the same. I think the first thing is around, we need to change how home care is perceived. And in that, social care, we have the same conversations, don't we? That health and social care is wrapped up into one. People still think that the NHS will look after me, and they don't understand the social care. And then within social care, they don't understand home care, as some ministers still don't understand home care. So we need to make home care the default care norm, and that's one of the strategies in Home Instead to really bang that drum, particularly now in terms of there is enough bricks and mortar to cope with the age wave. We're having problems with hospitals, bed blocking, etc. The answer is in the remit, is in their grasp, and home care is just clearly where people want to be, particularly as they age well. And the other one for me is choice. We need to completely change the funding model and who funds it. We can't continue to expect that funding's going to come off, and it's, there's funding available. I still think there's enough funding in the sector. It's just spent in the wrong way. Far too much goes to the NHS, as we know. That needs to be refocused on home care and care homes when appropriately needed. So that's the one. But also, we've talked about, we've got more people over the age of 80 than under 50, and that's only going to extrapolate. So we need to start having the conversation with people earlier, far earlier, kind of the pensions PR that was done quite a few decades ago now, that how do you want to grow old? Where do you want to be? And how you're going to think about paying for that, as well as support from the government. But kind of like we've got direct payments in this country, and a lot of local authorities, trusts don't like direct payments because it gives the client, patient, older person, whoever it is, choice. It comes back to choice. We need to move more to that model, take the money away from the commissioners, and give people the choice where to spend those funds. Then that will come back to having a great regulator to say, well, we've got 3 or 4 great businesses around this table. These are the good ones. These are where you need to you pay your funds. So the Australian model, the money falls the person, because you're thinking about what the person needs, rather than this archaic where we give money to a group of people in a local authority or whatever who haven't got the time, needs, or wants to actually know what Mrs. Jones wants at the end of the day. We could wax lyrical, all of us, about having our clients taken away from us because of 50 pence an hour because of a local authority, even though the client doesn't want to move. That's just ridiculous, because we have more, we have this circle of people going out of hospital, get released, great home care provider, and then they get released to a cheaper home care provider, and shocker, at the end they'll go back into hospital. We've got thousands of those cases. We've got proof points that this doesn't. So the funding's broken, the culture's broken, the way we communicate about our sector has always been broken, and I don't think as a sector we do a particularly good job at that, about communicating to Joe public what we do and how different we are, particularly in home care. It's tough, but we need to not stop striving that home care is the default care norm. So really, the government has got to be brave, and they've got to actually look at where they spend the money in it, not just the NHS, because we're going to have another winter crisis. We are, because we do every year. And guess what? We're going to get through it. But it's not by spending billions more on the NHS. So hopefully, from what Wes Streeting has said, that it's broken, and if he is really brave and grasps the nettle, he could change the care outcomes for decades ahead. And I think we've all got a part to play in leaning in and supporting them, but also calling them out where we believe they're wrong and believe there's a better way. And the most important thing, care professionals at the forefront of this, as we've said before, having an engaged workforce, a professional workforce, a well-educated workforce, guess what? It improves the outcomes of the people we look after. So we have to focus on the clients and obviously the patients, but we have to focus on the care workers as well. So hopefully the government's got a great opportunity to do something radical and different. Whether they will or not, we'll see.
Thank you, Martin. And I have said it now every webinar this week, and I'm quite sure I say it in every meeting I make a point to, that without care workers being well, we can't expect them to deliver outstanding, good, let alone outstanding care, I think. And there are so many things that are part of person's well-being, and many care workers get in touch with us at the Care Workers Charity. Their basic needs aren't met. They don't have enough money for food, for rent, for heating, to have a warm shower, to feed their kids. And when people are worried about things like that day to day, they can't come into work, leave it all at the doorstep. Can't expect them to do that and just carry on and give all of themselves, because they just don't have it with them, and we shouldn't expect them to do that. And yes, I did see the Secretary for Health and Social Care say that I think his words were around, if he doesn't change social care, reform social care, he will see it as a failure. So I'm glad that that's on his radar, and our new Care Minister Kinnock seems open to listening, and hopefully changes will come. I'm a bit concerned about timelines on all of that, because I think we need that sooner rather than later. I don't want it to be in 10 years' time. But yeah. Right. I see somebody's raised hand in the attendees. If you have a question, if you could please put it either in the chat or in Q&A. We'll try to answer those before we finish today. And Amrit, would you like to go next on the hopes for the future government?
Yeah, no, I think I'm hopeful. I think there's a handful of things. I'd like to see increased funding for providers and a fair pay for care workers, workforce development and clear career paths that they can help us strive for with workers. and actually integrating that health and social care. And I think, as sort of Martin said, it's been very disjointed, and really there's when you're working ground level. I remember when I'd set up my first home care business, and you realize actually, oh, hold on, I need to speak to a whole different team over here, and then take all of that information and take it to this whole different team who's got funding for the next half of this care package, and so on. And it all feels a little bit, and I think Martin's word was archaic, and I echo that. I'd like to, as we've said earlier, see a simplified CQC process, and for providers, support for technology adoption. I was on a podcast yesterday and we were talking about this, and how most providers in the UK are small providers, and they can't afford to test something because the test has to work. And so, that R&D can happen on the ground level. As a industry, we're really interested in trying to provide better quality care and be better leaders and so on. But I think what we need from the government is support in terms of, grants and so on, and actual, practical support with that. I'd also like to see mental health support for care workers, and sort of looking at how that could be expanded on and helped with the actual government, and centralize that. And finally, and I feel very passionate about this, the public awareness and appreciation for social care. If we sort of look at, COVID and how we had all banded together, I mean, the only people that were really out there were care workers. We were all nicely tucked away safely in our homes, and they were out there. They were, like the army, on the streets, saving the world, quite literally, and then taking, they didn't know what, back home to their own families and endangering their own families. And we forget very quickly. So I'd like to see some proper investment in talking about social care, care workers, and as we do with nurses who do a wonderful job, let's see some of that for our sector as well.
Thank you. And Trudy.
Yeah, some great messages. So let's hope they're being heard. Rather than give a long list, because I concur with my fellow panelists, I'm going to pick what's top of my list, which is to change how local authorities fund care. So, for instance, at Bellevue, we're an accredited real living wage employer, because I think that's an appropriate fair wage. But most importantly is that we pay people for whole shifts. Now, if I worked in hospitality, if I worked in retail, well, if the shop was empty and if the restaurant was empty, I would get paid for a whole shift. Now, we need to attract more people into care. We know we've got an amazing workforce. We have got some brilliant people, and we need to get more people who see that as a fantastic career option to come and join us. And we need to keep the wonderful people we've got. Now, if I could get paid for a whole shift, if I worked at that shop down the road, but I don't know if I'm going to get paid for a whole shift when I stay in my care work job, well, it doesn't matter how valuable and purposeful this job is. I'm going to make sure I do the right thing for my family. So why do so many home care providers pay for contact time only? Well, it's because the local authority, which funds 60% of home care, that's how they pay us. And then we put the risk on the care workers. Now, Bellevue's chosen to not do that. And there are many other care providers that also pay for whole shifts, which is fantastic. But I would ask the government to provide us with an ecosystem that allows us to do the right thing by our wonderful care workforce. So we need to look at different models of commissioning to do that. And there's some complexity in that. But one of the areas that I think needs to focus on, and it builds on some things that Martin said and that Amrat said about integration, is at the moment, from a local authority point of view, they have a legal obligation to provide care for everybody in their area who's assessed as needing it. And they have a finite pot of money. So what happens is they spread that money thinly across the group of people so that they meet their obligation. And that's tough. So they're effectively doing just enough care. And that then means that they've got a model, which means people who can go in at a low price to provide to provide the minimum care, like okay care, then that's what happens. Now, actually, so where's the local authority's incentive to go from okay care, that someone's getting some care, but are they really living their best lives? There's no incentive to go from that to great care. Now, we're representing this week professional care workers. Why are they professional? Because they take huge pride in providing that great care. And that's not what the environment is and the ecosystem is set up to do. Now, the difference between okay care and great care, actually the benefit isn't seen by that local authority who are funding us, it's seen by the NHS. Because if somebody's getting, well, just enough to keep them alive, versus enough so that they have feelings of self-determination and self-worth and that they're living their best life, then do you know what? The unnecessary admissions to hospital go down, the calls and the dependency on the local GP surgery. We have heard so much about the NHS being in crisis. And we all know, and I think our care workforce all know, but I want to make sure all the politicians do, and some of them do, and the civil servants that do. We know that the answer to fix the NHS lies within social care. So I think there's an unfair value exchange here between the care providers, the local authorities, and the NHS. So how do we make that work so that the NHS how do we quantify the benefit? And I think there's an obligation on us to say, well, there are better outcomes when you deliver quality care. Those outcomes are felt by the NHS. So how do we make sure that the flow of funding is appropriate so that the local authorities can fund care? Now, where does that come from? There's lots of complexity in this, and I welcome a conversation. And in fact, we're just kicking off a 2-year project up in the northeast of England to look at how we can explore different models of commissioning care. But this is bigger than just our one organisation and one project. And I would love to engage with central government and local governments on how we change this. And for me, that's top of the list, because then a lot of the other things can happen. And let's get the conversation around preventative and around professionalising care workforce, and that the whole health and care ecosystem is better off for everybody within it.
Very interesting, Trudy. Thank you. From what I've heard the Co-Minister say in terms of Labour's intention around health and social care, a lot of it is about moving from hospitals to community, moving from analog to digital, and moving from acute interventions to prevention. So all of which you've mentioned, and a lot of people have mentioned this week. So I think in many ways, we're already there in social care. We are not recognized for it, and we are not supported enough to take the next step. And in all of those. So that's very interesting to hear. And the whole week, I've heard people talk about commissioning, about how difficult that is, and about how much money sits within the NHS and how little in social care, and how much actually social care activity saves the NHS. And, you know, I've heard people over the years talk about one night in the NHS bed is £2,000, where a care home or a home care service will charge that for a week or more than that. So then the money needs to move from one part of the system to the other to be able to support people better. And nobody wants to be in a hospital, really, do they? That's the whole point. I think from a personalized care point of view, people really don't want to be stuck in a hospital. And whether it's a care home, whether it's home care, whether it's a personal assistant, supported living, whatever else it is in terms of social care support, companionship calls, for that sense of security and company. All of that, I think most people, if not everybody in this, I would say it is better than being in a hospital. So we need to keep pushing that. We're out of time. Thank you all very much for your time this afternoon, sharing your opinions, expertise, and ideas. Thank you to everybody who's listened. Like I mentioned before, we've recorded this session and we'll be uploading it on YouTube as soon as we can, as soon as it's edited. This concludes our series of webinars for this year. Tomorrow, over 30 people are taking part in a fundraising walk for the Care Workers charity for Professional Care Workers Week. So let's share them all on. I hope that, well, the weather looks quite good. So I think that hopefully are going to have a great time. And thank you very much again for your support, and have a lovely afternoon. Bye-bye.